All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And good evening, one and all, and welcome back to the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and for the next 2 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until midnight on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, and in the province of Ontario and the Northern Tier States, Classic 1220 CFAJ AM in St. Catharines, Ontario. In fact, they're just down the street from our studios here at the XZBN. And they stream at classic1220.ca. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, and on all social media sites, Xzone Radio TV. My first guest tonight is Stephen SAKELLARIOS, and we're going to be talking to Stephen about reincarnation, 19th century literature, and history. So joining me from Little River, South Carolina, is Stephen SAKELLARIOS. And Stephen, welcome back to the X Zone.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on again.
All right, for our listeners who are new to the show, who haven't had the opportunity of hearing you before, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I had studied Eastern mysticism since I was like 19, probably 50 years ago, and got a master's in counseling in there. And at some point I decided I got interested in photography and I got interested in video, and I decided to start a little company. And I had seen people that started companies with their passion, and usually what happens, they go commercial and they lose their muse, they lose their creative edge.
Right.
So I said, well, I'm going to have a creative project, that goes along with my company. So one morning I woke up and I just knew it was going to be about reincarnation. And I started telling people about my idea, and everybody I talked to had a paranormal experience. I was amazed as they started opening up. I wouldn't surprise you, I'm sure, but to me, I couldn't believe that some of these people had their own paranormal experience. So the thing that finally clinched it was had this little office, and this old fellow who was a kind of a grizzled war vet, with his cap from his ship he'd been on and everything.
Right.
And he was talking to me, and all of a sudden he started opening up. He started telling me about how he was sitting on the back porch at night, and his mother's spirit appeared to him, came up in the field, and he found out that she had just died, right? And once he unburdened himself of that was it. He left, right? He didn't want to talk anymore, And I thought, if this guy has a paranormal experience, everybody must have one, So anyway, it took me 5 years on very little money to do this documentary. It did get accepted for distribution to universities by Films Media Group. And I was, and then I spent a lot of time trying to promote the documentary. We're talking 20-something years ago.
Right. Okay.
And it was a lot harder to get anybody to talk about that subject than it is now. Things have really changed in the last 20, 25 years about reincarnation.
What's the documentary about?
Well, it's called In Another Life, Reincarnation in America. And the idea was that I would talk about the different ways that Americans were encountering reincarnation. And I made sure to emphasize that it was a phenomenon, that I was not talking about a belief. I was not talking about an idea. I was talking about how people encountered this actual phenomenon of reincarnation.
Now, prior to this dream, this epiphany, had you had any interest in the paranormal whatsoever?
Yeah, I'd studied near-death experiences, taught a little class on death and dying. I focused on death and dying in my master's program. And it comes in with Eastern philosophy, reincarnation is right there. But I'd never really focused on these things, and I didn't know anything about the research that was being done in Western society. I only knew about the Eastern philosophies.
Why do you think there's interest, especially in near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and what happens when we die?
I think there's always been that undercurrent, and it got squashed, excuse me, partly by traditional religion, and then materialistic science, what I would call scientism, came in and squashed it. So it's had an awful lot of suppression, over the years from different sources, but there's always been that undercurrent.
Had you had your own reincarnation experience, and if so, what was it?
Well, I had one little OBE many, many years ago
Mm-hmm.
where I was just briefly out of my body, but it was enough to convince me this is definitely real, because I mean, even if it's only for 30 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
it happened. But as far as reincarnation is concerned, I mean, I look back now and there were things like as a little kid, and I mean like 3 years old, I think. I don't have it documented, but I did write about it later on when I got older. I always wanted to see the rocky coast of Maine. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't know anything about Maine. Why
Mm-hmm.
would I want to see the rocky coast of Maine? So things like that as a child. I also remembered that my father was in the Merchant Marine, and I told him, I've been on ships too. And he said, no, 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 you haven't. And he kind of squashed that. But there was apparently a lifetime where I was on the tall ships, before the 19th century one. So there were bits and pieces of it that came up. Relevant to something I'd like to get into this evening. In about sixth grade, when they tried to introduce The Raven, the poem The Raven, that
Mm-hmm.
everybody believes was written by Edgar Allan Poe, I
Right.
couldn't read it. I had this overwhelming sense of grief for a lost partner, wife, and we're talking 12 years old, but I couldn't finish reading it. It was so powerful. So little things like that would come up.
Okay, what's the connection between Edgar Allan Poe, the Raven, and you and reincarnation?
Well, I wrote it. I was the real author in that lifetime.
How can you substantiate that?
Oh, I've got a, well, now it was a 59-page paper. I've recently
Right.
revised it. It's now a 66-page paper that's crammed with evidence, you know. So, so I can substantiate it. Whether I could, do it on a radio show is another matter. But, if somebody reads the paper, I can substantiate it.
Has it been peer reviewed?
No, I did submit a shorter version. This is like 66 pages. So you can't submit a 66-page paper to a journal. They're not going to devote the entire edition to you. But I did pare it down to maybe 10,000 words or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. And I had to be less ambitious about what I was trying to prove in 10,000 words than I was in whatever this is. And so what I decided I'd just try to prove was only that in this past life, as my past life self as Matthew Franklin Whittier, I said that Poe had stolen the raven from me. That's all I tried to prove. I just tried to show that he said so. And I submitted, I think it was to three journals. And the last one, for the heck of it, was a Poe themed journal. In other words, this was a fan magazine, what I
Right.
would call a
Okay.
fan magazine. And they came back, and one of the guys literally ridiculed me. It's sent to reviewers, and one of the reviewers says this isn't even suitable as satire. He says, and the other guy said something else equally sarcastic. So that was the kind of response I got, was that they were just, ridiculing me,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly had no intentions of ever publishing my paper. So yeah, it was peer reviewed.
So when did all this come about? When did you believe that you in fact were the person who wrote The Raven and not Edgar Allan Poe?
Well, that came in kind of late. I found Matthew Franklin Whittier on the internet
Mm-hmm.
uh, in 2005, which was 2 years after I released my documentary. And I didn't really start researching that case in earnest until 2009. And what I did was to take the methods that I had learned about when I was researching my documentary and applied them to my own prospective case. And one of the things I did was I had a couple past life regressions, and I didn't go very deeply under, but I did seem to remember a personal meeting with Edgar Allan Poe. So what I wanted was for somebody else to research it. I didn't want to muddy the waters by getting in there and being the researcher and the subject at the same time. But it kind of sat like that for a few years and nobody stepped forward. So I said, if this is going to get done, I'm going to have to do it myself. So I started researching it myself. I didn't start out with the idea that I had written The Raven in a past life. I just started out with the idea that they could have had a personal meeting.
Oh, okay, so what have you set out to do, and have you accomplished what you've set out to do?
Well, I have several goals, but one of the, excuse me, one of the main goals is to try to preserve this legacy that I've uncovered, which is Matthew Franklin Whittier's legacy, but also his wife, Abby Poyen Whittier's. The two of them were quite prolific, and they did some beautiful work, only a portion of which was plagiarized, So it's not just the ones that were plagiarized that I want to reclaim. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat. It's not just those, it's the whole thing. I've got like over 3,000 of Matthew's published works that I've carefully vetted and identified as his, and almost all written under pseudonyms, and then maybe 50 of Abby's. And so I want to preserve that work. Well, it'll never get preserved if nobody ever takes me seriously. I'll die and it'll get destroyed and the files will be erased and that'll be it. So somehow I've got to impress somebody enough to where it gets preserved. So that's goal number one. Goal number two is that I want to set these things straight. I want to set the record straight, because these people that have gotten credit for this work, including Edgar Allan Poe, these were scammers. These were imposters. And it's a huge scam is what it is. And I want to expose it and set it straight.
All right, how many years ago did Edgar Allan Poe write the Raven?
Well, he didn't. He didn't have anything to do with it.
Okay, hold on here. According to academia, he wrote it. So just for now, I'm going to give him credit as writing it, because I have no proof that he didn't.
Sure, but I do though.
Well, you see, this is where the problem lies. You have the proof. No one else is taking the proof that you have as legitimate proof, or else it would have been put into a journal somewhere.
That's not exactly true.
It's not.
Because I don't know what the last figures are, but we're talking 1,300, 1,500 people have read my paper.
Okay.
They don't write me. So I have no idea whether they take it seriously or they don't. But some of these papers get shared, which I've seen in the stats that they actually share them. So if they share them, either they're sharing them as that, look at this ridiculous nonsense, which is possible,
right?
Or they're taking it seriously. I think they take it seriously, and it scares the crap out of them.
But if they were taking it seriously, would they have not contacted you?
No.
Why not?
They don't want anything to do with me.
Listen, we've got to take a break, so please stand by. Exo Nation, our guest this hour is Stephen SAKELLARIOS. He is claiming to be the person who wrote The Raven in another lifetime. We're talking about reincarnation, and we'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
When I wake up early in the morning, lift my head, I'm still yours.
Welcome back, everyone. We're talking about reincarnation this hour here in the X Zone. Our guest, Stephen SAKELLARIOS, claims that he, in a previous lifetime, was the person who actually wrote The Raven, and that Edgar Allan Poe plagiarized it. Now, I understand you've done a lot of work in trying to present your facts to people who are in academia, and basically you've gotten nowhere. Tell me about the hypnosis sessions that you had.
Well, it was a trade out with somebody that I knew who was a therapist, and she was doing a self-help CD for the Monroe Institute, and I had a Mac, and I knew my way around the GarageBand software well enough that I could create background music for something like that. So I created background music for her CD, and she gave me two past life regressions, which she knew how to do. And again, I didn't go very deeply under. I would say I was relaxed, and every once in a while I would kind of dip down into it. Every once in a while something would bubble up, like you just remember, all of a sudden remember something about sixth grade or something.
Okay, yeah.
But it wasn't like I was, zonked out and didn't remember anything when I woke up, or not that level of trance. And I got at least one memory out of it that I could verify in the historical record. So I know that it was real, But this thing about Poe, it was, obviously everybody knows who Edgar Allan Poe was. And there were some aspects of what I seem to remember that didn't seem too plausible about him soliciting me for a third party to ghostwrite political material, which doesn't seem to make sense because Poe was like pro-slavery and Matthew was strongly anti-slavery. So why would he do that? And I remembered being on a porch of a cabin, and it does look kind of like the cabin that Poe had in New York, in as much as there's a big wide front porch. And I remembered a big wide front porch, but I remembered that it was like unfinished wood, like rough, unpainted, unfinished wood. And I can't find any reference to why Poe would have been in that house, when it was like under construction or just built, or not painted. Didn't make any sense. So, hypnosis is hit and miss.
That's right.
Yeah, no, everybody knows it. You can get real stuff out of it, but you might be throwing in your own imagination. You might be remembering something you read. So it's, so I kind of took it under advisement. I said, well, that's strange. Let's see if I can find anything.
Have you gone through a polygraph test?
No, I haven't. I mean, I've been
not?
practicing strict honesty as a spiritual discipline for 50 years.
But that doesn't count when you're trying to prove a point.
No, but I don't think a polygraph test would prove anything. I'd be willing to do it if somebody paid for it, but I don't know that it would prove anything.
Well, the majority of people would say that hypnosis is a bunch of woo science, that it proves nothing.
But they haven't studied it like I have, because
then why wouldn't you submit yourself to a polygraph test that has way more credibility than hypnosis?
I just can't afford it. That's all. If somebody would pay for it, I'd be happy to do it.
Well, wait a minute. Why would somebody pay for it for you?
I don't know. So there it is.
If I was so certain about something that you are so certain about, that you are the person who actually wrote The Raven, I would find the way to find the money, and I would use scientific methodology to prove my point.
Well, it's an interesting point. I'd never thought about it, so it's a good idea. I mean, I've got proof. I've got 66 pages worth of proof, so why do I need a polygraph test? In other words, if people won't read my paper where I've got the evidence, why would they care about a polygraph test?
Are you afraid of a polygraph test?
No, not at all. I just never thought of it. It never occurred to me.
And yet you want to prove something, and a polygraph test never dawned on you.
Well, a polygraph test I don't know, what would that prove? It would prove I'm not hoaxing.
It would prove that either you're a liar or you're not.
Right. But, I mean, I don't think anybody thinks I'm a liar. I think they probably think I'm delusional. The hoaxing thing is kind of down on the list of skeptical interpretations, I think.
All right, let's see. If somebody... Let me see if I can find an example.
I mean, you have a police background, right?
Yes, I do, yeah.
That would occur to you. Yeah, it just didn't occur to me. I don't know. Here's the thing. Who do I announce it to? You know, I can't seem to get anybody's attention. So even if I took a polygraph test and passed it, who do I tell?
Why do you think you're not having any success with getting the attention of the media, the academia? Why don't you think anybody's really interested?
Well, I think there's two reasons. I think the first is that it's just ridiculous, and they're just not going to go there because it's just ridiculous, and especially when there's a past life element, so they just automatically dismiss it. The
Well,
second, the
I'm,
second one is
mhm.
that they're scared of it.
Why?
Well, I ran this by, I think it was ChatGPT 3.5. Of course, if you tell it, I was the past life author of The Raven and so on,
Mm,
it will give you a whole bunch of, reasons why the scholars, all the experts all say that's not true.
hmm
If you say, run this as a hypothetical, then it will do it, it's like a jailbreak, right? So I not just Poe, but there's other famous authors. So I gave it the whole theory, and I said,
Right.
if this were true, and if this were accepted as true, what would be the effects on academia and society? And I don't have it in front of me, but
Mhm.
it was a real doomsday scenario, especially for academia, with radical effects,
But
you
you're
know.
taking this on the word of AI, and AI has not come to the point yet where it's really able to do a lot of things that people think it can.
Well, yeah, but AI will talk to me and the scholars won't. So AI is the only one that will talk to me, and you.
When it comes to the validity of people who are making claims under hypnosis, a lot of people who claim to have had alien abductions, they go under hypnosis. And when they go under hypnosis, people listen. And they don't claim to be anyone special except themselves who have had this experience. I can't understand why you claim to have all this evidence to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are in fact the person who wrote the Raven in a past life. Can't get anybody to listen.
It's pretty remarkable. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's not that I can't get them to listen. I can't get them to actually look at the evidence.
Where did you acquire all this evidence you have?
From mostly primary sources. I dug very deeply into periodicals of the 19th century.
Hmm. Now, have you have you gone to different universities and checked with people in the literary departments or the historical departments to see if anyone there can shed any light or any semblance of interest?
Well, online, not physically. I can't travel to these places, but I have written to hundreds of
hmm
scholars. Yeah.
Now, Little River, South Carolina, are there any universities near that where you live?
There is one, I believe. Yeah.
And
And
have you
there's others within driving distance.
and have you gone there to see the professors and the university staff to see if?
I think I've written to a couple of them. Well, the thing is, you can get on their department websites, and you can typically find bio sketches of each
hmm
professor, and there might be 10, depending on the size of the college. And of those, maybe only one of them specializes in an area that's even relevant. And scholars are very particular about their focus, right? So if some guy specializes in the 18th century, you don't want to be writing him because he'll say, I don't have anything to do with the 19th century, or
Right,
so on. They're
right.
very narrow. So basically, there's like one guy out of 10 that's even relevant enough to write to. So I've done that. I've gone through the departments of the entire United States and Canada and Europe and England and written to the one or two people who were, specialized in a relevant
hmm
area. And I might, out of like hundreds, literally hundreds, like 600,
Right.
I might get 5 responses or maybe 10. Of those, it's usually a very brief, patronizing 2 or 3 sentences. Um, the only people I've been able to get who would dialogue with me at any length are the critics of those famous people. In other words, like the Poe critics
hmm
might write to me a little longer, but they get to a certain point. I mean, it's really more typical of Dickens because Dickens is another subject. They'll write to me for a little while, but they'll get to something that scares them and then they'll cut it off. I've gone too far with them, even with them. I've gone
Have
too
you
far.
actually picked up the phone and tried to speak to these people?
No, the only ones I've talked to,
Hmm.
there was a computer scientist who offered to Zoom with me and to
Hmm.
take up, my research. And he has a sophisticated attribution program, talk about science, where he would compare like Matthew's work with Poe's work and some
Right,
other third person, and it comes up with a graph, right?
right.
Well, we got as far as looking at the story, Some Words with a Mummy, which I believe Poe also stole from Matthew. And I'd forgotten, I told him that I thought Matthew had written it, and I'd forgotten that in the book I said I think Poe modified it, right? So the graph shows this is Poe's writing, and then it gets about two-thirds in and it drops down and it's not Poe's writing anymore until it gets to the very end and then it comes back up again. And he said, can you look at the story and see the point at which you think that Matthew might have, his original stuff might have been there? And I did, and it was a very clear block of writing that's very much in Matthew's style. And I said, I think it's this block here. And then I had to put this text into a particular format that
Hmm.
he wanted, and he showed me how to do it. And I got the program and I did a whole bunch of Matthew Franklin Whittier's work compared with his plagiarist. And I got it all prepared and I sent it to him. And there was a long wait. And then he wrote back and said, I'm bowing out of the project. I'm not going to get involved with it anymore. He didn't give a reason other than he's busy. And then he said, there might be an undergraduate that might want to take this up. He didn't even say graduate student. So, and he was very friendly,
Yeah,
I mean, he was, so I mean, I think he just got scared,
but
personally.
but scared of what? Is he
Scared of the
is
feedback that he
is
would get.
academia really afraid of the truth?
They're afraid of the truth, but they're mostly afraid of ridicule. So if word got around that
Hmm.
somebody was taking me seriously, he would get ridiculed along with me. And they're very much afraid of that because they can't publish, they can't get promoted, they can't get tenure. They'll end up losing their position and not being able to get hired anywhere. See, so it's very
Yeah.
serious for them.
All right, stand by. We've got to take our break at the halfway point. Exonations. Stephen SAKELLARIOS is our special. I said your name wrong, didn't I?
That's okay.
All right, Saker.
SAKELLARIOS.
Thank you.
Yeah.
His website is www.reincarnationproof.com, and we'll both be back as we continue here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell. Whatever you do, don't go away because we'll be right back.
Early in the morning, lift my head. I'm still yawning when I'm in the middle of a dream. Stay in bed, float upstream, float upstream.
And welcome back, everyone. For those of you who enjoy reading about the paranormal and parapsychology, the October edition of the X Chronicles newspaper is now available with our compliments and the compliments of our multiple number of advertisers. If you go to www.xchronicles.net, that's www.xchronicles.net. You just click on the link and you can read the entire paper online. This month is 100 pages. And I was just checking the stats with our staff before I came to air tonight. And there is in excess of 22,000 downloads already. So a lot of people are reading it, and it's because of you, the members of the Exo Nation around the world, that we are getting the truth out there. Because here, whether it's the X Chronicles, whether it's the X Zone TV network, whether it's the X Zone radio TV show, our mission is simple. We're searching for answers, but demanding the truth. So if you'd like to read the X Chronicles newspaper with our compliments, full color, 17-inch by 11-inch, newspaper size, www.xchronicles.net. You know, with all the hard work that you've done, Stephen, how does it make you feel that nobody is taking you seriously?
Well, I bitch and complain in my blog, so I get it out of my system. Yeah, it's frustrating, but you know, I just keep it up. I just persevere because it may take another 10, 15, 20 years. You know, I don't know how long it's going to take to break through, but there's also going to be a new generation of scholars coming in. So that, you know, that may be what it takes.
But what happens if nobody takes it anywhere? And
Well,
it
that's a
does
good
die
question.
with you.
Then I die, and somebody comes in and throws my hard drives in the trash and puts all of the books back on eBay, and nobody knows who wrote them, and that's the end of it.
If somebody had, let's say that you're the person that you're trying to contact, okay? And if you received the information that you send out to these people and you read it, what would you think?
Well, I mean, as myself, as somebody who had studied reincarnation, it's not kind of a fair question in a sense. I'd have to put myself in the shoes of a academic that doesn't believe in anything, you know, doesn't believe in the paranormal, and who has bought the entire myth of Edgar Allan Poe and is deeply invested in it, perhaps, because you've got to remember that these people are really invested. You know, they've written a dissertation, they've taught classes, they've written books, they've given presentations at symposia. I
Sure.
mean, if this turned out to be what I say it is, that Poe was just a scammer and had nothing to do with it whatsoever, they'd be ruined. Everything they did would be a laughingstock.
But what
It would be
happens?
completely wrong. So if I was that
Mhm.
person, I would ridicule it, but there'd be a little sweat on my brow. I'd be a little bit nervous at the same time that I was laughing.
Okay. Um, I'm listening to you with open ears, and I'm trying to figure out why this is so important after all these years. What does it really matter?
Well, for that, you'd have to get to know who Matthew Franklin Whittier was, because he was a literary genius, in my opinion, and he wrote a lot of fantastic stuff, not
But
just the ones that got ripped off and made people famous. But he wrote, yes, I mean, it's one heck of a legacy. When I say 3,000 pieces, of course, they're not all brilliant, but there's some extremely good work in there. And it's all scattered. It's all lost, you
so what
know.
you're
And
based
to
what?
me, it's very important to get it
Well,
back
of
to you.
course, because you're saying that you're him.
Yeah, but it's also, it would be important even if I wasn't him.
I don't think you would pay the same interest in this story or this hypothesis if you did not believe you were not in fact the reincarnation of this gentleman.
At first, I wouldn't have. Now I would,
Why? Because
because I
you
know how good it is. I know
oh
how important it is.
right, but okay, you're using the
Objectively, even pulling myself completely out of it, I know how good it is and how important it is.
then how come nobody else does?
I don't know. You tell me. You know, it mystifies me that here's what I expected. I expected 98% of the people that I contact to brush me off. I expected 2% to get really interested and to engage me. And it's not happened. It's been, with like one or two exceptions. There is one religion professor who, you know, will talk to me and is on board, but he's busy and it's not really his area,
Right.
you know. Uh, I didn't expect 100% rejection, you know,
Yeah.
and so I mean, there it is. I don't understand I don't understand the 100%.
Why would a religious professor have any interest in this?
Well, here's the thing: we have similar backgrounds, so you know, he's studied. I mean, the group that he's in and the teachings that he studied, I also studied. So we have a very similar background. And so we're on the same page on that score. Reincarnation is no real surprise to him. And after we got to talking, I think he realized that I was a person of integrity and that, if I said these things, that probably I had really done the research I said I did.
What can you tell us about Matthew Franklin Whitaker?
Whittier? Huh?
Whittier.
Well, he was, of course, the younger brother of the famous Quaker poet John Greenleaf Whittier. And he had kind of an inferiority complex, which happens with a brother of a famous person, and he, for whatever reason, he really wanted to keep anonymous very strongly. So all of the work, with like 10 exceptions maybe, that he published over 54 years was anonymous. And even if his work was stolen, he would not publicly come out and defend it. Now, part of the time, that was because he was involved in secret abolitionist work. So he had extensive connections with the Underground Railroad. He did not want to risk being put on the stand or being exposed because, like any agent, it could endanger the other people he was connected with.
Right.
So there was that reason. But even beyond that, his brother said in a recommendation letter that he was not forth-putting on his own account, was the kind of quaint Quaker way to put it. And so he was very secretive, but he was brilliant. And and I had a friend like this. There's a few people like this. My friend Mike used to be able to just generate ideas like quicksilver, just off the top of his head, brand new ideas that nobody'd ever thought of before. He just was like a fountain of these things. He was very kind of unstable in his personal life, but he could just create. He was very, very creative. And Matthew was like that. He could just generate brand new original ideas just off the top of his head. Very, very prolific, So that's the kind of person he was. But he was very stoic. People who met him thought that he was like a very staid kind of a ministerial person. He was described as being ministerial.
Right.
But he was a humorist, so he had a tremendous sense of humor. He was also a very deep philosopher, but he made sure nobody ever knew that was his work, see? So nobody ever connected it with him personally.
Okay, now what's the connection between Whittier and his wife? Because I understand that she plays an important role in all of this.
Yeah, she did. She was 4 years younger than him. She was raised in an upper class family. Her father was a French marquis who had escaped Guadeloupe in like the late 18th century from a slave uprising. So it was like slave money. And he'd escaped to America and married a local girl. And there was 9 kids. She had 8 brothers and sisters. And she was brilliant. She was like, I can't think of the names, but there's certain child prodigies out there. Alma Dusher, I think, is the name of the little. She's not little anymore, but musical prodigy.
Right.
That's like composing things at age 6. Whatever. She was like that, near as I could tell, in poetry and in music. So Matthew desperately wanted an education. He was the only able-bodied farmhand at the Whittier farm. His brother had been kind of disabled, couldn't do heavy farm work. His brother was allowed to go get a higher education. He was not, so he ran away from home. This is all stuff I've found evidence for. The Whittier people won't tell you this. But he ran away from home, made it on his own. But Abby volunteered to tutor him. This is what I've extrapolated. It's very difficult to prove, but there's a ton of evidence pointing to this, that she took it upon herself to pass along her upper-class tutored education to him. So, he was self-educated, but he was also educated by her. So she was instrumental in him, getting an education. And then eventually they got married, although her father tried to stop it because he was of a lower class and he was very class conscious, apparently. So eventually they eloped. When he was 24 and she was 20, they finally eloped.
Now, did they spend all their time in the United States, or did they go over to Great Britain? Did they travel?
During her lifetime,
Yeah.
she died in 1841.
Right.
During her lifetime, I think she may have spent several months in Guadeloupe recovering or trying to recover from consumption, from
Right.
tuberculosis. Her first cousin was Charles Poyen, who introduced mesmerism to America. So I think because he was studying to be a doctor, I suspect that from a couple different clues that he may have been taking care of her there in Guadeloupe because he was from Guadeloupe.
I see.
So she may have spent a little time in Guadeloupe, but Matthew didn't leave the country until after she died. He went to Europe for several months on a tour in 1851.
Now, did Matthew make any claims that you've been able to find about Edgar Allan Poe taking credit for The Raven?
A bunch, but he did it all in code.
Why?
And
Why would
and
he
this
do
is
it in
why,
code?
because he didn't want to be identified. You know, he always did everything in code. I mean, he was a very, very secretive person. He did not want to be sued, and you may know that Poe was very litigious. So Poe would have sued him if he'd come out. And Matthew could not allow himself to be put on a stand. It would have been a life or death situation for the people conducting the Underground Railroad if
Right.
he'd been forced to, yeah. So he protested in the only way that was open to him, which is in coded references. When I say code, I don't mean cryptography. I mean a kind of references and inferences. And there was a bunch of different techniques he used. One of them was
Stephen, I hate to do this, but I've got to take my break. Please stand by.
Sure,
When
we'll
we
get
come
back to
back,
it.
we'll talk about this code. Exonation, if you'd like to find out more about the work that Stephen has done, visit his website, www.reincarnationproof.com. And we'll be back on the other side of the short break as we say goodbye to Stephen, as well as this first hour. When we come at the beginning of the next hour, that's when hour number 2 starts. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Visit us online at www.xzbn.net, and don't forget you can read the X Chronicles newspaper for October 2024 at www.xchronicles.net.
Last night I didn't get to sleep at all. No, no. I lay awake and watched until the morning light washed away the darkness of the lonely night. Oh, and last night I got to thinking maybe I should call you up and just for
And welcome back, everyone. Stephen Sakellarios.
Sakellarios.
All right. Is with us. And first of all, Stephen, thanks very much for staying with us. And it is a very interesting topic, but tell me about this code.
Well, Matthew couldn't come out, and I think he tried. I think he tried to get his editor to let him say something anonymously, and his editor didn't want to get sued and came out with a little editorial about that subject. So I suspect that's what happened.
Right.
Matthew couldn't come out, so he used this code, which he'd used in many other circumstances and throughout his life. I mean, I've got a lot of examples of this. And one example was he had to write a review of Poe's The Raven and Other Poems, his compilation. He was obligated to do this, and it was a very awkward situation for him. So I think he wanted to make sure that there was a message for posterity, even if nobody at the time picked it up. So what he did was he made several references, but one of them he said that called Poe Chanticleer, which is French for a rooster. Chanticleer crowed so bravely, but then showed himself to be just a dunghill fowl. Well, to me, that was a reference to a poem by La Fontaine that I believe Matthew had translated as part of his homework with Abby. And it's a 2-stanza poem. There's only 2 stanzas in it. The first one is a metaphor about a rooster on a dunghill that manages to scratch up a big pearl. And then the poet drops the metaphor completely, speaks plainly, and says that he's talking about a plagiarist who has found a manuscript and thinks it's pretty good, but would much rather get the money for it and doesn't really understand it.
Wow.
Okay, so if it's what I think it was a direct charge, in the context of Poe's The Raven and other poems. It couldn't be much more direct. He did maybe I found maybe 8 or 10 of these. That was 1845. The last one I found was 1853. And once you learn Matthew's style of code, it's very clear what he's saying.
Is there a scam in all of this?
Yeah, and I'd love to lay it out because it
Please,
says,
yeah.
I don't know if you've ever watched like Kit Boga on YouTube,
No.
where he screws up the scammers. He scams the scammers. So anyway, it was a scam, just like the guys that send you the emails that say, oh, thank you for your purchase, and if this $450, if you didn't mean to spend that, call us, right? And they'll get in and they'll get your bank account. It was just like that. So what happened is that Matthew wrote this poem, The Raven, from real life circumstances. Everything in the set and setting of the poem was literal, okay, in my opinion. And then when the raven enters the room, that becomes symbolic. But basically, it was literal. And what he was doing was reading Abby's occult literature, because Abby was an occultist and a mystic, okay? So he was reading about spirit visitations. You probably had people talk to you about spirit visitations,
Oh,
and
many
animal
times, yeah.
signs. I don't know
Right.
if you're familiar with the spiritualist teaching that one of the kinds of signs that a loved one on the other side can send you is animal visitations. Animals will get close and stay closer than they should normally.
Right.
So Matthew had been reading about that, and the raven was kind of a parody on her books. Okay, he kind of half believed it and half didn't believe it. So the raven becomes the animal sign that actually argues with him against the reality of life after death, right? That's Matthew as a satirist, because he was a satirist. So he showed this poem, I believe, by all the evidence, to Edgar Allan Poe in a private meeting, and authors would do this. They would share, I'll show you my stuff and you show me yours.
Right.
And he showed him this poem and a couple other pieces, including what turned into Annabel Lee and Some Words with a Mummy, and gave him a copy. Poe probably requested a copy. So move forward to 1845, Matthew publishes The Raven in a brand new journal called American Whig Review. He signs it blank Quarles. That's a reference to the poet Francis Quarles of the previous century, who was deeply religious, austere poet. Matthew had praised Quarles back in 1831. He praised him like 2 or 3 weeks before The Raven came out. He was a admirer of Francis Quarles. And I think blank Quarles was a joke, an inside joke, and it stands for Abby Quarles because she was a fantastic debater. Okay, so he publishes it. But Poe is a reviewer, a critic for the New York Evening Mirror, which is a little daily newspaper. It's no great shakes. I've looked at it. So Poe gets an advance copy of American Review, sees the poem in there, and says, I've got to act fast, because he'd been showing bits and pieces of it to people for
Oh, I
years.
see, yeah.
So he's got to act fast. So what he does is he convinces his editor, N.P. Willis, that's my poem. Here's a copy from a long time ago. See, he had a copy. And he said, I have permission from American Review, from their editor, to scoop them by 3 days. So Poe scoops Matthew by 3 days in the New York Evening Mirror, but he takes out Matthew's pseudonym and puts in his own name.
Oh, God.
And somehow he knows that Matthew is not in a position to come out and defend himself. I think it has to do with abolitionism and pro-slavery people that had tabs on each other, But anyway, so when it comes out, Poe scoops it by 3 days, claims authorship, and then it comes out in American Review, and he says, oh, yeah, I wrote that too. And everybody believed him and believe him to this day. He had nothing whatsoever to do with it. And that was what made him famous, because he couldn't write that well on his own.
Yeah,
So suddenly
I
now
understand,
he's famous. Yeah.
Listen, how much time have you spent on all this research that you've done?
Every day since 2009, 15 years.
15 years.
Yeah.
Having gone through the historical documentation of Whittier as well as Poe, is there a resemblance between you and Whittier, and are there any other similarities in your lifestyles?
A lot. Yeah. First of all, we look almost identical. And if this were a visual, we could show it. Matter of fact, I can send you the comparison photograph if you have a place for it. Yeah, nearly identical. His nose was a little bit longer and he had a little bit of a bulbous tip. Otherwise, basically, it's the same person. And a lot of traits in common. I mean, I'm a philosopher. He was a philosopher. You know, he was a spiritualist. He was a paranormal researcher. He's on record in 1855 investigating physical mediumship and signing, with a small group and signing as to the phenomena that they had witnessed. So he was a paranormal researcher just like I am. So there's a whole bunch of parallels.
As a paranormal researcher, just breaking away from Poe for a few minutes here
Sure.
as we close off this very interesting hour. What has been your findings that have concluded beyond a shadow of a doubt that the paranormal is not paranormal, but it's basically normal?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've studied NDEs, I've studied mediumship, as a side interest, and what emerges from all of that is that the evidence has been there for like 150 years. There's been people like a lady named Catherine Crowe was a journalist who studied paranormal cases back there, like she published in like 1848.
Wow.
And the introduction to these books sound exactly like the introductions to the books today. I mean, it hasn't changed. So the evidence has been there. Well, Matthew was a signer on, I forget how many, there were like 10,000 signatures or more, a petition to Congress in 1854 asking Congress to seriously look into spiritualist phenomena, which of course they never did. They just laughed at it. But this has been going on a very long time. So it's like anybody that cares to really be objective already knows that it's real and has known for 150 years.
What is your take on the UFO phenomena?
Well, I've studied it quite a bit, and I don't know. I mean, I've seen something that might have been a UFO off in the distance. I was walking the beach at night, and I heard the sound of crickets very loud, but it was over the ocean. It was in the wrong direction.
Wow.
And I looked up, and way off in the distance was kind of a two-colored light that was kind of, gliding around, and then it like disappeared. I don't know. I just know that crickets don't like fly around over the ocean. And I do know that the cricket sound is associated with UFOs, but that's all. I've never had any experiences of my own, but it's the witnesses sound pretty darn credible, What can I say?
Yeah.
And we've got the thing that, that they showed that Congress admitted to, that they've got the air fighter pilots, photographing these things flying around.
Yeah, but in all honesty, they have not been identified as extraterrestrial. They've just
I don't think they are.
No.
I saw a program recently that made a lot of sense to me that they're actually coming from inside the Earth as opposed to, other planets.
So you're talking about the inner Earth theory?
I think so, yeah. How much time have we got?
We've got, less than 3 minutes.
Okay, so I met a guy who was an occultist many, many years ago, and everything that he told me checked out according to what I had studied, right?
Okay.
Right down, Kundalini experience, spirit releasement, circles, the whole thing. Because, I'd studied this stuff. And then he told me with a straight face, he told me this story. He said he was astral traveling. He went down into the earth. There were people down there. They were eating people like cattle. And they could see him, and they were hostile. They were not pleased that he was there. Okay, I didn't know where to put it. I put it on the I don't know shelf, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I think there may be something. What I think is that in Hinduism you have the yugas, the ages, very long ages, and it goes cycles up 4 ages and down 4 ages. So I think what we've got is people from a previous age who are more advanced than us who managed to survive.
And they're staying beneath the earth?
And then staying beneath the earth. There's also a whole lot of evidence that Mars used to have a civilization on it. Are you up on that?
Yeah, I am. In fact, I've had Dr. John Brandenburg from NASA. He's a physicist who has found evidence that millions of years ago there was a thermonuclear war on Mars.
Right. That's a good person to interview.
Yeah.
Well, there's a whole bunch of artifacts that people are finding in the rover photographs, and they're all over the place. It's like a debris field,
Yeah.
So So they may have been part of that civilization as well. In other words, they may not have been interstellar, but they may have been interplanetary.
Stephen, the time has come when I must say so long to you, my friend. I want to thank
All
you so
right.
much for coming on. Always great talking to you. I love challenging you because you've got the answers.
Okay, I enjoy it too, actually.
All right, so listen, if anything new comes up, give me a shout. We'll get you back on. All right, and
Excellent. Thank you, Rob.
we'll try and come up with some ideas that we can help you to get the information you have in front of the right people.
Awesome.
Take care of yourself, Stephen.
Okay, thanks. Enjoyed
Take care, buddy. All right, Exonation, if you'd like more information about our guest this hour, visit his website, www.reincarnationproof.com. I'll be back on the other side of this short break as hour number 2 of tonight's show here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, commences right now. Whatever you do, don't go away, and we're coming to you right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, and throughout Ontario and the northern tiers of the great United States of America on Classic 1220 CFAJ AM in St. Catharines, just down the street from us. We'll be back. Don't go away.